Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Saturday, March 2nd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game is in 182 days. I'll do the math for you. 26 weeks. Almost there. 26 weeks, just half a year away. The game against Michigan in 273 days. Good news, spring football, a lot closer than that. That starts on Tuesday at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. And today we're going to be looking at the Ohio State defense and some of the storylines to watch on that side of the ball this spring during those 15 practices, culminating in the spring game on April 13th. And we're going to be doing it once again with Ross Fulton. He is the X's and O's guru at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And when Ross is on the show, we are sponsored by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse, proudly offering nationally acclaimed USDA prime steaks, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. Not something you can say about my pronunciation, but that's okay. You can go to jeffruby.com/Columbus. You'd rather eat dinner there than at my house anyway. jeffruby.com/Columbus. Check out the menu. Make a reservation today. All right, Ross. I have reservations about the start of the show, but we're just going to power on through, and we are going to talk about the Ohio State defense today. They're just sort of looking at what are the sort of storylines that you're watching, what are the things you're looking for when we get to watch practice windows, when we get to watch the spring game at the end of the spring. I guess first, let's start with year 3 of the Jim Knowles defense. Year 1 was kind of, well, they're just kind of installing it, and everyone's sort of figuring it out on the fly. Year 2 looked a lot better. Year 3, boy, there's a lot of talent back and there's a lot of returning starters, and it feels like they could do a whole lot of different stuff this year if they wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because over 3 years, I feel like the scheme has shifted quite a bit from time to time. And I guess maybe some of that's personnel driven because last year, prior to, you could make a clear demarcation between before and after Latham Ransom's injury, and the scheme changed a lot between those times. Prior to Ransom's injury, they were playing a lot more cover one man, mixing in some cover two. And then afterwards, as we talked about, it was noticeable both against Michigan and Missouri, was just a lot of soft country cover four, soft zone. And I guess, maybe to protect, having Sonny Styles at deep safety instead of Latham Ransom. But so they've used a lot of concepts. So again, I think that it will be interesting to see what is the emphasis in spring. Because again, as we talked about with the offense, like you tend to put in your base defense early, and they certainly have the personnel to go back to playing a lot of man coverage if they want to. With the 3 corners and with Caleb Downs coming in in Ransom's return. So again, it would be interesting. Do they go that route? Do they mix in more complex cover 4 coverages? Yeah, some of all the above. But that coverage mix will probably be the first thing I'm looking for.
And how much of that, the different coverages and the variety of coverages, how much of that is stuff you're actually going to see in the spring versus how much of that is more of a later in the year install and you're just kind of doing the base stuff right now?
Yeah, well, I guess, there's always, you have to always be a little careful with over reading into the few things you see in the spring. But again, to me, it's telling what they themselves consider their base defense. What are they focusing on in spring? It's when we're just making our basic defensive call, what is it? Is that cover one, for instance? Is it our nickel package? What are we doing as our sort of, this is what we installed the first day of camp.
So looking at personnel now, and this feels like this could very easily turn into that old Chris Farley talk show sketch from Saturday Night Live where he has Paul McCartney on. He's like, hey, remember when you were in the Beatles? That was awesome. It feels like you could kind of have that conversation with a lot of the different elements of this year's Ohio State defense because, boy, they were pretty good last year. And, yeah, they got a whole bunch of guys back. And, oh, yeah, they also added Caleb Downs. And Caleb Downs is a pretty unique talent when you listen to coaches talk about what makes him special. It's a very long answer because there's a lot of different elements that make him special. What does adding someone like that to this defense, because they're losing Josh Proctor, who was that adjuster safety last year, what does bringing in someone like Caleb Downs do to not only maintain the level of the Ohio State defense this spring, but potentially raise it?
Yeah, I mean, as solid a season as I thought Josh Proctor had last year at that field safety adjuster spot, he was still somewhat limited. He clearly was more comfortable closer to the line of scrimmage, and wasn't a person that you could ask to be in man coverage a lot. So now Caleb Downs can do basically everything. You have Latham Ranson, who's much more comfortable, as I said, in man coverage. You couldn't really count on Stunny Styles being a man defender on a slot wide receiver. So when you put that together, you just have a lot more flexibility. You can respond easier to motions and shifts with them flip-flopping roles. You can do a lot more coverage-wise, whether, as I said, in sort of match cover 4 or, if you want to play man coverage and count on one of them to handle the tight end or slot receiver. It just gives you a lot more versatility. Like you have a much higher bar at the safety position than, particularly, as I said, at the end of the year where they had to be pretty limited to protect Proctor and Styles, who are both bigger guys who are more comfortable closer to the line of scrimmage and less, as deep safeties are in man coverage.
Well, Sonny Styles feels like he might be a little bit the odd man out in that safety rotation this year because you've got Lathan Ransom back. You've now got Caleb Downs. You got to figure both of those guys are playing. You got Malik Hartford behind Downs to provide some quality depth there. You've got Jordan Hancock at the nickel spot, and so it feels like you're kind of out of places for Sonny Styles to play in the safety room. It sounds like he's probably going to open the spring in that safety room. All the indications have been that there is not a positional change yet, but we've been talking for months about the fact that it feels like a positional change might be in everyone's best interest this spring. What are you thinking that the deciding factor is there? What are you thinking would make a move to linebacker potentially a beneficial one for him? Or do you think he maybe should stay at safety and they just have a bunch of extra good safeties?
Well, I think if he stays at safety, he's not going to play. And so he'll be on the bench. And so if I were advising him, I would tell him to move to linebacker. So what you have to keep in mind last year, until Ransom's injury, right? Like he was a linebacker. You can call it a nickel, whatever you want to call it, but he was the Sam linebacker against 12 personnel. And then when teams would put 3 wide receivers on the field, they'd take him off. And what we can't know for certain because Latham Ransom happened to get injured in that Wisconsin game, but Wisconsin game was pretty noticeable that even when they went 12 personnel, they did not take Jordan Hancock off the field. Instead, they gave Styles they gave him a series or 2 at filling in for Josh Proctor to get him some reps on the field, but he wasn't part of the regular rotation. And so I personally think Ohio State's defense is worse off if they take Jordan Hancock off the field. I think he is stout enough against the run and he gives you so much more against coverages. I suppose there are situations where you're playing a Michigan and they're in heavy personnel that you're going to want someone there. But that's I would be telling Sonny Styles, that's a very situational role. You're maybe getting 15% of the total snaps of the first string defense, maybe. And so again, he's not the safety that Latham Ranson and Caleb Downs are. He's pretty limited. So I personally would move. I think conversely, if he doesn't start the spring at, linebacker, every day that he's not there is a wasted chance to get reps. That is a position change in terms of being an interior linebacker and filling. So, I think the choice is between him being a part-time, player at best and having the opportunity to play all the time. So I don't think they should use, I guess you could say it's a question of how much they want to use more a 3 linebacker looks as opposed to what they did last year. I just think Jordan Hancock's one of their best 11. And so I'd want him off the field as little as possible.
And if they do just play 2 linebackers, which it would be 4 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and then the 5 defensive backs, if you got Hancock out there, there's no returning starters there, technically. Cody Simon, I think, has started a little bit before. He's, I think, someone that you kind of pencil in for sort of towards the top of the line in terms of number of expected reps this fall. But then you've got potentially, maybe Styles is there, maybe he's not, but you've still got Gabe Powers. You've got CJ Hicks. That's a room that's got some talented, intriguing players who we've heard a lot about and we haven't really seen play a lot of linebacker at Ohio State. So, what are you looking for there? What is going to be the deciding factor there in terms of which of those guys maybe gets one of the starting jobs this fall?
Yeah, to me, like Cody Simon is a returning starter. Like he played a lot last year. He was very good. He was very good at Mike against Missouri. So it's really, but that's like the one really open position on the defense, and it's a critical one. Um, not to say that Still Chambers was a great will linebacker, but he was certainly serviceable. And I to me, like what's going to be the difference there is like who can read their keys correctly and read and react and fill the gaps. I have said on Buckeye Huddle before that what I've seen out of CJ Hicks for the most part, unfortunately, has not been particularly encouraging in that front in terms of reading keys and reacting. Like, someone can be the greatest athlete in the world, but like, it does take a certain type of skill to be able to fill holes and do what you're supposed to do in the defense. So that to me is going to be like a big deciding factor. And yeah, I would say that, you know, almost maybe besides the fifth offensive line spot, I would say will linebacker is like the biggest question mark in terms of like, I personally think Sonny Styles is going to play there, as I said, but like, the more time they spend with him not playing there, I guess that would concern me more. But it's sort of like anyone's guess in terms of how that might shake out.
Well, we will see how that starts shaking out next Tuesday when the Buckeyes open spring football. 15 practices culminating in that spring game on April 13th. We're looking forward to seeing as much of it as we possibly can, and whatever we get to see, we will tell you all about it at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That is where Ross and our whole team of X's and O's gurus are there to make you a smarter football fan. We got Mark covering recruiting. We got Tony, Kevin, and I covering the team. Plus, a really active and fun community on the Huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse. And of course, whenever Ross is on this show, we are also presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse, the award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. JeffRuby.com/Columbus. Check out the menu. Make a reservation today. You won't be disappointed. It is a delight. I love it. You will love it as well. I promise. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.